Hey there friends, spring is finally here and the garden is waking up. Garlic planted last fall is breaking through and onion seedlings are moving into their new homes. We've got Bok Choy seedlings needing a boost, spinach that shrugged off winter snow, and Mizuna reaching for the lights. Fava beans teach us the importance of hardening off, while overwintered kale and surprise mustard volunteers remind us why winter gardening is so rewarding. Plus, we're preparing sweet potatoes and chitting red potatoes for planting. Yes, I said chitting. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get into it. This garlic bed was planted last October, and I didn't record the actual planting because I hadn't planned this video series yet. The garlic cloves came in from last year's crop, which grew surprisingly large. They were so big that experienced gardeners even mistook them for elephant garlic. And if you see a friend growing impressively large garlic, compliment them by saying that it could be elephant garlic. They'll appreciate that. After planting, I added about 2 inches of composted cow manure as a top layer. That's the material that you're seeing here. There's some straw and rocks and stuff that needs to be filtered out. Before planting, though, I ran into a problem. I hung my garlic to dry in an outdoor shed, but the humidity was very high, causing most of it to become moldy, sickly looking. I brought it all inside and dried it in front of a fan for like a whole day. And although it dried, it didn't quite look right. A few months later, the garlic cloves felt small and loose inside their skins. And even though I was disappointed, I decided to plant them anyway as an experiment. Now, on March 19th, I'm excited and pleasantly surprised to see that the garlic is beginning to sprout. Since I was unsure about how well it would do, I ordered garlic from an Etsy supplier. I planted that garlic in mid-February, and once the ground had thawed. That garlic is back there and has begun sprouting too. Now we'll see which garlic performs better. The cloves planted in October of last year, or those planted this year in February. This bed here is planted with a storage onion, a variety called Patterson. I ordered the seeds from Johnny's Seed Company and started them on February 20th. To start the seeds, I sprinkled a pinch of them into a solo cup filled with unsifted potting mix. This method works pretty well, but I think I would have had better germination rates had I used seed starting mix. On March 16th, I separated the seedlings and transplanted them individually into 2 inches of compost with a small pinch of fish fertilizer. That's 772 with each transplant. Here are my Bok Choy plants. This year, I'm growing 2 varieties, both from rare seeds. One variety has a tall white stem that almost resembles celery. It can be eaten that way too. And the other is a short green stem type. I planted these in unsifting potting mix using a convenient 16-cell tray. If you're familiar with standard full-size trays, these cells would be equal to about 128-cell tray per 1020. The plants look pale green and slightly stressed, as you can tell. Probably because I didn't use seed starting mix and it messed up the moisture levels. I'm not worried though, these will do just fine. To help them out, I sprinkled a bit of blood meal on top. A dusting, and almost an unmeasurable dusting. And yesterday, I transplanted them into this bed, which has about 2 inches of compost added on top. Each plant will receive a teaspoon of blood meal, maybe even less, maybe like a half a teaspoon. I'm using blood meal here because Bok Choy loves nitrogen and will quickly absorb it. Blood meal provides nitrogen that's readily available for about 2 weeks. And for a slower and steadier nitrogen supply, I'm also going to be adding Feathermeal across this bed. Just a brief interruption. Thanks for watching. If you found this video useful so far, like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really helps, and I look forward to giving you updates along this whole growing season. Here's my spinach, planted around the end of August. It's an F1 variety called Space. And right now, the plants don't look very impressive, but they're growing greener and healthier each day. Spinach is incredibly hardy. I live in Massachusetts, Zone 6B, and the winter we had this year was unusually cold. These spinach plants even survived being buried under snow for about 2 weeks. On March 18th, I saw the first signs of new growth. And after seeing how well these have done, I've decided to overwinter spinach every year from here on out. It beats starting spinach seeds indoors in February, which is what I did last year. Using that method, I didn't get to harvest until about May. I'll be adding Feathermeal to these beds, as well as a teaspoon of blood meal for each plant. I was considering letting this bed flower and collecting the seed, but because it's an F1 and space is limited, I've decided to chop these once they begin flowering in late spring. These are my winter-bore kale plants. I planted them last season. They're an F1 hybrid that I got from Johnny's Seed Company in like 2019. They look pretty rough. I'm going to be cleaning them later on today. Even though they do look rough after winter and a bit of frost damage, they're starting to show signs of fresh green growth along their stems and even up in the top. This new growth signals to me that it's the right time to start feeding them. I'll use Feathermeal for long-term nutrients and blood meal to give them an immediate boost. Once the weather warms up and I prune these plants, I'll add compost to further enrich the soil. Here's a 16-cell tray of Mizuna. They were planted on the 12th of March. And I'm growing 2 varieties this year, an early green type and a pink variety. Mizuna is a mild salad green, similar to arugula. And last year I was impressed by how productive these plants were. I planted the seedlings in Miracle-Gro organic seed starting mix, which I'm trying for the first time, and I've liked it so far. These seedlings will probably remain in their tray for another week. All of my seedlings are kept under T5 bulbs with lights positioned about 4 inches from the leaves. And this is to maximize their growth without burning the leaves. On nice days, I put all of my trays outside so they won't need to be hardened off when it's time to transplant them. Earlier this month, I did an experiment with Fava beans and Hardening Off, which we'll discuss shortly. Beets. I really enjoy pickling beets in my summer salads, but cutting round beets can be a bit of an inconvenience. So this year, I'm growing a new variety from Rare Seeds. It's a cylindrical beet, which should be much easier for slicing and preparing. I planted these in organic seed starting mix indoors and on a heat mat for most of the time. I planted them 3 days ago on March 16th, and you can already see some sprouts emerging. My plan is to transplant these outdoors in small clumps. I'm not thinning them. Once they develop 2 true leaves, or when their roots firmly hold onto the soil, that's when they're going out. I'm still figuring out exactly where to put everything in my garden. For a moment, I thought that these beets could fill gaps in my garlic bed where cloves don't sprout, but I've reasoned that that's not a good idea. Later in the video, I'll explain why. Meanwhile, let me know in the comments why you think planting beets in a garlic bed might not be ideal. Parsley. I planted this round of parsley seeds in a mass nursery about 10 days ago. Yesterday, I saw 1 seedling popping up, and today, there's probably about 7 or 8. And I expect even more to come soon. Parsley seeds can sometimes take up to 3 weeks to sprout, so seeing growth this quickly is pretty impressive. I also have a parsley plant behind me that I'll show you real quick. It died back during the winter but survived the cold. I'm expecting it to begin regrowing and sending out fresh leaves very soon. The young parsley seedlings don't need any nutrients right now, but the overwintered parsley plant will get 1 teaspoon of blood meal for immediate growth and some feathermeal around the base to help long-term nitrogen release. To help visualize why I'm using both, here's a simple graph showing the differences between nitrogen availability between blood meal and feathermeal over time. Okay, fava beans. These fava beans were sown on the 12th of February and transplanted on a date that I can't remember, but I'll show on the screen. They have already experienced 1 hard frost. These plants here were properly hardened off, but these were not. You can clearly see how important the hardening off process is for seedlings. Some gardeners recommend spreading out the exposure over a week or longer, but I've found that's not always necessary. These plants only had 3 days of outdoor exposure. On day 1, they got just 20 minutes of full sun. On day 2, a few hours of partial sunlight. And on day 3, several hours of direct sunlight. And as you can see, they handled the transition just fine. But keep in mind that this experiment took place before the spring equinox. So the sun wasn't as strong as it will be later on in May or June. No matter the time, if you're regularly taking your seedlings outside on sunny days, right from the beginning, you can skip the hardening off process altogether. Think about it this way. Plants sown directly outdoors never need hardening off because they've already exposed from the start. That's how I treat all of my seedlings. Indoors on cloudy days, like today, most of them are inside, outside for the shooting, and outside whenever it's sunny and around 50 degrees. Looking at these fava beans, you can clearly see damage on the leaves of plants that weren't hardened off, but the new growth is recovering nicely. The beans I'm growing are a mix. Some are the Deuce variety from Rare Seeds, and the other are store-bought variety from like a pound of beans, like those dry beans that you can get. Since fava beans cross-pollinate easily, I might remove the store-bought plants. Then again, I might leave them in just to see if something interesting happens. The store-bought beans produce large, impressive seeds but aren't very cold hardy. The Deuce beans are smaller but handle cold weather very well. Ideally, I'll eventually get plants with large seeds that are also hardy. But genetics doesn't always work that way. I could end up with plants that are weaker and produce smaller seeds. It'll be interesting to see how it turns out if I do decide to do that. I also have fava beans that I sowed about 10 days ago. Those are with my other seedlings, and I'll be transplanting those out here in this exact spot in maybe a couple of days, maybe 3 days. They go quick. Once they've germinated, they'll spring up. Peas. These are a variety that I got from a department store last year. The germination at that time was not good. I made the mistake of not picking them early enough, so they became fibrous and poor snacking, as they do when they don't get picked in time. So I let them fully mature, and now I have pea seed in abundance at nearly 100% germination rates. I plan on using these seed as a bed filler, a cover crop, to support the soil while my main crops are small, but still growing. Then, when the main crop is larger and starts to fill in the space, I will cut the pea plants down for compost or harvest them continually for shoots, which are great for salads. These plants here were started on February 20th, and I may see their first harvest for shoots in the next week. These, on the other hand, on the table I'll show you in a second, were sown for pods about 7 days ago. That brings us to mustard greens. These mustard greens are overwintered volunteers. That's a funny gardening term that describes edible plants that grew all by themselves. Really, they're just weeds cleverly disguised as gifts. Like my spinach, these mustard greens made it through the winter surprisingly well. And honestly, I'd call these plants gifts for sure. Seeing how well they've done, I'd definitely plant more mustard greens at the end of this summer, and every summer to follow. Overwintering plants like these is seriously underrated. It's not impossible, but it would be very difficult and maybe impractical to get this level of growth so early in the spring had I planted these seeds just a few weeks ago. And right now, there are way too many plants crowded here. And even more sprouts are coming up. They're very small. So I'm going to thin them out, leaving rows or clumps. I'll keep them trimmed until they start getting too large, and then I'll eventually chop them down entirely. Because they won't stay here long, I'll only add some blood meal to help them grow quickly. The bed already has nitrogen-fixing plants that don't need extra nitrogen fertilizer, so I won't be spreading Feathermeal. If you're curious about nitrogen fixation, I made a video explaining exactly how it works and how scientists discovered it. You can check that out here. The last topic in this long video, if you've watched this far, is potatoes. First off, if you're still here, you're officially my favorite person, and honestly, I should be subscribing to your channel. Even if you usually don't comment on channels, let me know you're here by leaving the word favorite in the comments. This year, I'm growing two kinds of sweet potatoes. The first type is a standard orange sweet potato, which I picked from the local grocery store. The second type is a purple sweet potato I first heard about on the Netflix show Blue Zones, which covers communities known for people living past 100 years. I'll have plenty of extra slips, young sweet potato plants, in the coming weeks. If you want some, leave me a comment and I'd be happy to send some your way. It's important that the store-bought potatoes are organic, since non-organic potatoes are often sprayed to prevent sprouting. To get my potatoes started, I buried them horizontally about halfway into damp peat moss. This encourages them to produce vines called slips, which I'll root and plant in my garden. Sweet potatoes can't handle frost, so I'll wait to plant them outside until there's little risk of frost, usually sometime in May for where I live. Right now, it looks like I'm perfectly on schedule. These potatoes were started, I'll put the date here, and currently they're sitting in these totes indoors. On days when my seedlings are outside in the sun, I'll sometimes put the sweet potatoes under grow lights positioned far above them. Last week, I noticed some mold forming on the potatoes. Since I brew wine and mead, I have an acid-based sanitizer handy. I used that to clean off the mold and then cracked the lid open to prevent more mold from growing in the humid air. Just like sweet potatoes, I bought these organic red potatoes from the grocery store as a budget-friendly way to grow more potatoes. But getting these ready for the garden is different than sweet potatoes. Regular potatoes need to be chitted first. Make sure you emphasize the first syllable when you tell your friends you did it. On March 12th, I placed them upright in an egg carton in a well-lit room to encourage sprouting. Usually, potatoes sprout from just one end at first, and sometimes sprouts even appear from the bottom. So on day 3, I flipped them over and positioned them so that the sprouts faced upwards. That's exactly how I'll plant them next week, covering them with about 2 inches of compost above the top of each potato. We'll talk more about planting details in the next week updates. If you're curious now about how I plant potatoes, check out this video right here. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next week.